If you're planning to create jobs as part of the Innovator Founder Visa, self-sponsorship scheme, or generally you're just an entrepreneur in the UK and you're planning to hire people, especially for the first time. In this video, I will share my experience and what I learned from hiring a total of 13 people for 4 job positions, what I learned, and perhaps these tips can help you navigate the recruitment and employee retention process in a much more efficient and better way. So let's get into it. Okay, so before I go into it, I'll give you a brief introduction about me and my background. So I became an entrepreneur at the age of 22, following the completion of my master's degree in international law at Newcastle University. I was endorsed for a business visa called the Tier 1 Graduate Entrepreneur Visa at that time, which was the equivalent of the startup visa, and I got 2 endorsements from Newcastle University. After that, well, actually, what my startup was, before I go into the next visa. My startup was a prop tech platform. Essentially, it was a booking.com for student accommodation targeted to international students. And I built it based on my experience as a former international student in the UK, as I moved there when I was 17 years old. Anyways, after the Tier 1 Graduate Entrepreneur Visa, I moved to the Tier 1 Entrepreneur Visa scheme, and as a part of the requirement for that visa, I had to create jobs. Now, it could have been part-time, it could have been full-time, but it had to be the equivalent of 2 full-time jobs for at least a year. Anyways, I created 4 positions, which were part-time. Now, I was only 25 years old at that time. Okay, this was my first ever venture. I didn't have experience of managing employees or anything, and it was really the first time. So I learned a lot of lessons in that process. Surprisingly, it all worked out very well. And, the whole experience with recruitment, with managing people, of course, there were difficult moments, there were difficult situations. Nevertheless, it worked out very well. And before 2020, my startup operated across 30 UK cities. I also got approved by the NatWest Entrepreneur Accelerator, which was an endorsing body for the former Innovator Visa. So I've pretty much been through the process, and by virtue of my business visas, I obtained settlement, ILR, and therefore British citizenship after that. So really, I've been through this entire process of both entrepreneurship and navigating the business immigration system in the UK. So now what I want to cover in this video is a very balanced view on both being an employer and managing employees, but generally the problem with not just the modern discourse on employment, but generally I think in our whole world on social media, on the internet, is that we live in a very polarized world. Okay, so every argument has an extreme shift in one direction or the other. So either somebody is pro-employee rights to the extreme, or purely capitalistic and extremely pro-employers. Now, what I want to do is to create a balanced narrative in this video. So pretty much doing my good for the world in this age of polarization, but also to give you real insights from somebody who's been an employer and a startup entrepreneur himself. So I'll start with the good things and the key things that I really enjoyed during that process, and then I will navigate into some of the challenges, some of the negatives, and some of the difficulties. So let's start with the good ones. The first thing is that I think life is a journey of personal and self-development. Okay, I think we need to better ourselves every day. And in line with that, when you hire people, especially for the first time, it gives you this opportunity to really enhance your own self-development. Okay, that's a pretty good aspect, I would say. And it really does help you grow as an entrepreneur because it involves a whole range of skills. It's not just about learning about compliance, about legislations, about that, but most importantly, you learn to manage people, and really it enhances your people skills, which I think is vital for every entrepreneur. So there is that. And secondly, once your business gets to the stage of hiring people, and you do hire people, actually, let me correct myself, when you hire the right people, which I was, I guess, skilled but also lucky to have an amazing team of employees, it really is a game changer for your business. Okay, it really does help your concept grow to a whole new scale. So really, at some point, once you have enough growth, of course there's always exceptions, hiring people, and which is just the first step, but also retaining those employees and creating that balance, it really becomes essential in your entrepreneurial journey. So there is that. Now that's the good stuff that I would say. And lastly, I will also add that when you're surrounded with the right team members, okay, which I was, and I'm pretty sure some of my employees, former employees, may be seeing this video. So hello and kudos to you. I hope you're all doing well. I would say it's amazing. It really does enhance this experience of being an entrepreneur. Of course, you're always on your own and you're the person who's responsible at the end of the day, but you pretty much sign up for that when you become an entrepreneur. So these are the good things that I really, really enjoyed. Now, let's go into some of the challenges and difficulties, because this is what you're probably looking for in this video and what will actually help you. Now, I would say the first thing, and this is a theme that I've covered in every video, the first thing is that immigration and entrepreneurship, generally, they can be a bit incompatible. And as a result, hiring people while you're complying with immigration requirements, it doubles the challenge that you have ahead, because presuming you want to use the evidence of job creation in your later visa application or settlement stage, then you're going to have to require a specified set of documents to prove that. And sometimes a small mistake can literally cost you your visa. This was the case in my previous visa, and I'm pretty sure it will be the case with the current Innovator Founder Visa as well. So you really need to make sure that you understand your obligations, both as an employer, but also as a foreign entrepreneur on a visa. You need to understand your obligations correctly, get specialist help if you need from day one, and make sure you understand those obligations from day one. That's very, very crucial. Secondly, since I hired 13 people, I would say I got exposed to a wide range of people with different backgrounds, different personality traits, and different personality traits, it's good. And I think differences help us grow in the world. However, some people, they can be a bit difficult to deal with, okay? And the difficulty could be simply because they just don't want to do the job. They just waste time, which you will have to take action. But the difficulty, it doesn't just always mean there's some form of malpractice or bad intention from the employee themselves. They could be very well suitable for the job, and they could be honest and decent people, but managing different personality traits, it can make it a bit difficult, especially if you're not experienced in this whole recruitment and employee management sphere. So there is that. And actually, with that in mind, that drives me to the next point, which is motivating employees. Now, this is one thing I want to tell you this, that as a recruiter, as an employer, it really is your duty to make sure that you motivate your employees very well. And no, a paycheck is not always the sole motivation, especially if you're not paying them a very high salary. So I believe that employee motivation is vital to growth. And as such, how you motivate them, as I said, it goes far beyond just a paycheck. It's about helping them grow in those roles. And that's very, very important to get correctly. And as such, if you haven't done that before, let's say a lot of the people that I hired were recent graduates. So I took it upon myself to actually help them develop some skills and learn about new software, learn about new tools. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky, and it really is a skill and a competency that you really have to go and work on additionally, in addition to all the other things you have to do as an entrepreneur, which we know how hard it can be. Nonetheless, you need to have this relationship with your employees, which is based on a win-win basis, okay? But as such, discipline and setting clear parameters for work are also vital, okay? Sometimes some people just don't want to grow. They don't want to help your business. They just want to come to the company to get paid and either do the very bare minimum in an unacceptable context or just not do anything at all. So what you really need to have is to set clear parameters, starting with the employment contracts. You need to set these expectations very clearly. What will happen if these expectations aren't met, let's say on a multi-layered sort of structure? So first one is a warning, the second one is disciplinary action, and third one is you just have to let them go. So that's very, very important. And also, the other point I want to mention is red tape and legislations that you have to comply with. I believe in full compliance, always. It's your legal duty as a citizen, as a resident, as a person in the world. You have to be compliant with laws. And as such, being compliant with employer legislations in the UK, I'm not, this is just my own opinion. Of course, I may not agree with laws or the extent of the laws, but I have to be compliant, whatever those legislations may be. And I would say, personally, in my view, there's a lot of red tape that you have to deal with as an employer. Okay, whether it's data protection legislation, whether it's Health and Safety Act, there is a lot of legislations that you have to comply with, and I would really urge you to seek advice on that to really understand your obligations correctly. And this is what I did as an employer when I started hiring people. So yeah, you really have to prepare yourself for all that red tape. And I know for foreign entrepreneurs, we all come from different countries, and in another country, a lot of these legislations may not exist. But in the UK, it's a whole different game. So it's very important that you understand your obligations correctly. And lastly, the last point that I want to raise is that there is legislations that protect both employers and employees. However, there is a theoretical basis for things, and there's also a practical view of things. And theoretically, yes, let's say in a contract, there is a notice period and you have to abide by it, and the employee has to abide by it. But a lot of times, if there is a default, or let's say a violation of the contract from the employee, there isn't really much you can do. Okay, yeah, technically you can take them to court, but really that's going to cost you a lot of time and it's going to cost you a lot of money. So a lot of times you don't really practically have a legal recourse as an employer, and this is something that you have to accept and you have to accommodate for in your financial planning. That's all I can think of for this video. And if this is the first time you're hiring employees, whether as part of the let's say regulations of your visa, or you're just hiring employees, you're not even on a visa, I wish you the best of luck, and I hope these tips help you. Thank you. See you later.